What's new, pussycat? Whoa, 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 whoa.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Everyday Analysis. I hope you've enjoyed things so far. Interviews with Mladen Dolar and Julie Resch, which are on the channel, you can take a look at. Today I'm going to put up another video that I recorded some time ago. Some people might have seen parts of this interview that I did before. Some parts of it I haven't released before, which was when I was in Ljubljana talking with Alenka Zupancic. It's an extremely interesting interview about conspiracy theory from the perspective of one of the most important psychoanalytic theorists that there is. So her sort of takes on conspiracy theory are not those that you'd necessarily expect. Before I do that, a couple of quick mentions. If you happen to be a London listener, there's one event here that I'd like to tell you about that is happening in North London very soon, Monday, so it's a few days after now. If you happen to live in London, you can come and hear Ted Rees talk about his fantastic new Everyday Analysis pamphlet, which is an analysis of a Marxist analysis of the decline in capitalism at the moment. We'll also hear from Chris Hogg, who's got a forthcoming pamphlet, which is completely different, more of a fiction memoir called Me, My Dad and Michael Jackson, all about growing up in the 80s. And he's an extremely intelligent and important storyteller. So it's going to be great fun. Please join us in London if you want to do that. Benjamin Studebaker's 4 essays on the revolutionary subject. Those probably many of you guys know. Ben, one of the best political theorists. This podcast is called The Lack, if you want to check it out. And he's written a fantastic pamphlet as well, which you can order at the link below. So I'll have it on the channel again later. And finally, another forthcoming one for those interested in conspiracy theory and in Lacanian psychoanalysis, a really bizarre and interesting essay called Where We Go, One We Go, Not All, by Sean Witters and Frank Smecker, which is forthcoming, which is a playful and interesting Lacanian reading of QAnon and the politics of addiction and the relationship between this interesting word anon, which we hear in Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, QAnon, and sort of tracing that through this really bizarre Lacanian framework. So all that exciting stuff coming up in person, if you're free to come to the event, or at the links below if you want to order yourself a pamphlet and get one delivered to wherever you are in the world. With that said, on to today's video. I hope you really enjoy it. I certainly found it one of the most interesting interviews I've ever done. Alenka Zupancic is, in my opinion, the leading, or in the two leading philosophers, contemporary philosophers working today. And here she talks not only about her own philosophical positions, but about the contemporary topic of conspiracy that sort of touches us in various other ways today. So I hope you enjoy it, and thanks for listening and supporting the project. Okay, great. So let's start by thinking about conspiracy theory just in general. I mean, obviously there's been a kind of explosion of interest in conspiracy theory recently, but how did you come to the topic, and what made you decide that this was a kind of critical topic to think about?
First of all, simply because it did become such a massive phenomena that was not at all something that could be dismissed as marginal, just some crazy people involved in this kind of theories, but something that was very much becoming part of the mainstream, and which for me was also a pointer that this was not at all simply about some kind of individual pathologies and craziness, but it is also a kind of a symptom of certain social pathology and of something socially going on in this way. And so when I first started to think about it, this was a few years ago, the interest was stirred by this kind of massivization, massive presence of conspiracy theories. But now I also follow precisely the way in which they are used also by the mainstream to kind of as something that the mainstream seems to be opposed to, but actually is much less opposed to than it seems. And so I'm also arguing about simply proclaiming conspiracy theories the major problem of today's societies. I don't think the major problem is conspiracy theories. I think the major problem is a kind of complicity, if not conspiracy, between conspiracy theories and what we perceive as some kind of a business as usual liberal mainstream, which actually, I mean, I can explain this a little bit more, but this is just to say that I'm all strongly skeptical or critical to this targeting of conspiracy theories and phenomena like them as the key issue. It is part of the key issue, but it's too easy to just say, okay, this is the pathology, because this pathology has a certain logic, how it functions within the social and how it gives alibis also to all kinds of social agents with these supposedly extreme views and so on.
So one of the key things here is approaching conspiracy theory as a topic without being sort of judgmental and critical by default, by just, without just being kind of, because of course, as you say, and maybe you can say more about it, like it plays a, conspiracy theory itself has, probably exploded, got bigger recently, but also the mainstream media has become kind of obsessed with conspiracy theory as the enemy, whereas I think what you're saying is conspiracy theory as we're seeing it today is much more of a symptom of a problem with mainstream politics than it is a kind of niche alternative other way of thinking. That
precisely, because I think there is this fascination by certain, particularly the most extreme conspiracy theories that is detectable in the media because they want to grab the spectacular, the whatever excessive side of this phenomena because it sells, because it's so strange, and it definitely is. But what I'm the place where I see the mirroring or the kind of complicity between what we perceive as like normal structures. Let's take the climate change, for instance, as one of the many topics of conspiracy theories, the denying the climate change or seeing in whatever effort is being made to stop it a kind of conspiracy of the capital, of the mainstream and so on. What I find interesting, and this is why I really liked a lot the movie Don't Look Up, which I know many people dismissed us, but I really thought that this was perfectly pictured in the movie, because their the main problem there is not conspiracy theories. They are there, but the main problem is how the very elite, the very general public, very normal people, so to say, act all the time in this kind of what psychoanalysis calls disavowal. So we know very well that there is this comet coming, but we go on as if with our business as usual, as if it were not true. And for instance, there is this great title that appears in the movie at some point, I mean the newspaper title, which says the deadly comet is approaching the Earth, will we have the Super Bowl this year? And I like this very much because it's not the simple denial. It's not saying there is no comet. It says, oh, we know very well that it is, but the business as usual continues. And I think this is precisely the business as usual is the form of disavowal. And the way we just go on as if everything that we knew is not there is a form precisely of disavowal. And then come the conspiracy theorists and they say, okay, look at this elite. They clearly don't believe that there is a threat because they go on with their business as usual. And they are not so stupid, so there is no threat. I mean, they kind of, they are just deceiving us to make us, and here I think it's very interesting because you can see how actually conspiracy theorists kind of enact the unconscious of the elites or of business as usual, which is precisely the denial, the disavowal of the threat. So they kind of not really oppose it, but they kind of take it like their own part of their own argument, saying, okay, but they are not so crazy. And my point is, they are so crazy. They're precisely so crazy that they don't see what is becoming completely obvious, or they hang on this business as usual, this capitalist machinery as a way precisely to fetishistically disavow what they know to be true, because you can also say it's a psychological mechanism for them. If they make another million today, then there is no comet in a sense, you know. So
I mean, it occurs to me just to ask whether there are any conspiracy theories historically or whatever that you've been, let's say, tempted to believe in, because one of the things you just said there, like about the climate change issue, I mean, it makes perfect sense. It also kind of makes sense with one of the old conspiracies of the moon landings.
Yeah, I actually write about this in the in this article that you mentioned. It's very interesting because I like this moon landing theory, and I think one thing that one can see clearly in this conspiracy is how conspiracies are never simply some kind of fantastic thing. They always contain what Lacan called le peu du réel, you know, a little bit of the real, which is displaced, distorted, but it's not. But there is some real somewhere in this story. And relating to the moon landing conspiracies, it's very interesting that Jodi Dean actually wrote a book also on conspiracy. And she has this long discussion precisely of how the whole moon landing, the whole preparations also previously and so on, how this completely coincided and was fused with the television becoming the focal point of the family. This was the moment when the television really became the foyer, the home fire of her family. So, and the whole way in which it was presented, and it was staged in a way that it was meant to be televised, and this kind of surplus of television staging of the event was there. So I'm not saying that this now explains these theories, but the surplus reel of television being intrinsic part of the whole was, and so it's interesting how then this the whole argument, how there is this little bit of the real. Then you have another interesting thing related to the moon landing theory, which you see how the crucial point is not really about whether finally they did set the foot on the moon or not, but the whole point is about some people, they are really efficiently deceiving us. They are efficiently deceiving us, and so if, let's suppose, due to some kind of new discoveries, it would turn out that actually it was all staged in the television, then I don't think they would be celebrating this, because this is the point with conspiracy theories. The moment that they are proved, the conspiracy fails. So it is not a good enough conspiracy. So there should be probably another conspiracy behind it. So there is this idea that they, in order for them to really be strong conspiracy theories, they must not simply be accepted visually as such, because this the kind of undermines the very proposition of this almighty other who is deceiving us constantly with no pause, just and efficiently.
No, I mean, let me follow up on that. But I mean, I was also thinking that with the moon landings one, it makes sense what you say, because I read recently a survey in the US where I think it was something like 48% of people thought it had happened. You know, so basically, what's important here is not what's happened, but also this kind of disavowal. Because if people think that was a complete construction just through the telly, but nevertheless they carry on as if America was progressing, and you know, so it sort of works either way, which I think is quite interesting. But I mean, let's come on to that big point you were just coming on to about, I don't know, question of the big other, I guess, or of deceiving you. Because is this one of the things here that, like, you're trying to get at the idea that conspiracy theory is, you know, it's not just about, it looks at first glance like it's about breaking up the mainstream narrative, but actually it's got a similar structure, because it works by this kind of illusion that, you know, up there somewhere in the world is this group of logical individuals or powers which are deceiving us, but that in a way that anchors reality, right, or produces a kind of almost something comforting.
Absolutely, because I really think that there is no one around who has a stronger belief in the big other than precisely conspiracy theorists, in the sense that they believe in an agency or a group of people who are there, who are consistent, who never miss, a beat when it comes to, who are completely consistent and who are able to, deceiving us in this way. So there is this idea that the other is unfallible, but at the price of it being deceitful. So to say there is the only big other is the deceitful, the big other of deception, the fraud, the big evil genius, to use the Cartesian. There is Cartesian evil genius. There is the big other who is absolute, but at the same time is evil, and it is only from our kind of slightly off perspective that we can see this whole deception, but actually the deception is impeccable, and so the other is in a way infallible. It is not at all about pointing, or usually it is not about pointing to the contradictions of this big other, but even if there are contradictions, they are part precisely for them of this bigger plan of the other who is deceiving us all the time. So, and I think this is precisely the limit of the so-called critical skeptical attitude, because they are not ready to admit that perhaps, okay, why not? They are elites, this is a true entity. I mean, people who are ready to pull many strings to organize this or that, but this kind of idea that there the way the society functions, and that some people are really profiting from it, and in an organized way perhaps, and so on, this is not something that in itself is a conspiracy. But to think that this is follows a kind of impeccable logic that has no flaws, and for me this is the big difference between, let's say, critical theory and to point at the precisely inconsistency of this big other, so to say, as opposed to showing how actually whatever we do, they are already a step ahead of us, and every new thing is just so it's interesting, this relation to, or this belief. So I think there is this, to some extent, there is this dimension that better evil big other than none. To some extent. I don't think this explains the whole, but it is comforting. But it is also, Jameson had this interesting point when he was discussing conspiracy movies from the 80s, which were thriving in a very different context socially from 80s, and what are we living in now, it's quite different. But his point was precisely that there was some kind of subversive aesthetics there in them, because they were the only means left for people to imagine the social as a totality. No, not just something that it's completely fragmentized and so on. And here you have a kind of, you can hear this resonate also with this question of the big other, of somebody having everything under control, even if it is with evil intentions and evil purposes. So there is this kind of negative, positive way, the way that nobody else is willing to even try to think of the social as some kind of totality. And I'm not talking about some kind of fascist organic totality, but just to take in the society as society, not just as kind of a completely dispersed and fragmented space.
Maybe with that in mind, we could just go back to what you said. I thought it was quite interesting about how when it starts becoming too believed in, or when people accept it as truth, it stops being conspiracy, right? Because I think there are these people I've heard making the arguments that even from a psychoanalytic perspective, that we shouldn't use the word conspiracy, because by using the word conspiracy we're casting it off as false and so on. Actually, I think this is a silly thing to say, because what you said, that there has to be this element of unknown, unexplainableness for it to function as conspiracy, right?
No, I think conspiracy theories are a kind of entity ontological entity which has its own standing. And I don't think precisely that we can see it simply or see them, conspiracy theorists and theories, as some kind of a potentiality of several scenarios, only some of which then turn out to be true or untrue. There is this surplus of investment in theory, in connecting things, which is there and which is pathological, even if it is true. And I like to use this same formulation, that Lacan used in relationship to jealousy, saying that a jealous husband, the jealousy is but pathological, even if, I don't know, your partner is actually cheating, which is not to say that, but there is the very structure of jealousy is something more than just being the kind of direct response to, so it is true, but it can still be the way what you build around it, how you relate to it, can be pathological. And I think there is something similar at work with conspiracy theories, even when they are true, the way they function, the way they posit themselves and argue is something pathological. But pathological obviously is not to say that and the rest of us we are just normal. I mean, it's but so there is this surplus which is interesting and which is not. But the reason for which I said that they must not turn out to be true is simply that the emphasis is on the fact that they are deceiving us, not so much on what they are deceiving us about, but on the fact that they are deceiving us. But the moment that this deception is revealed, it also turns out to be not good enough, not deceptive enough. So there is this kind of a deflation, this kind of a disappointment, which comes with the fact that, but if it were possible for it to be revealed in this sense, then it is not. It was perhaps not a real deception, just an attempt to cover up some whatever dirty business. So, because the successful deception needs to remain successful, in order to be this deception with capital D. So, in this is what I meant before. That then, but you always need to. You are in a position to this thing which is there. For instance, if you take Trump, Donald Trump, who and he's not the only one of these politicians who were at the head of a country. I mean, we are not talking about some marginal politicians, but about people who are actually running a state, and who were kind of very much prone to some of these conspiracy theories. The whole QAnon thing is related to this and to the so-called deep state and so on. But what is interesting for me is precisely this: even when you are in power, obviously you are in power, there is still this other power that you need, that actually is in power. This is the argument. So it is not that now I am in power, I can tell you the truth. No, but even in power you cannot really tell the truth, because there are all these dark forces of the deep state that are actually running the show even when you are in power. And this is a very interesting, that you remain, I would say, kind of libidinal configuration of these leaders is that they remain in opposition even when they are in power. And they remain transgressive even when they embody the law. So there is this kind of play going on as well, which is interesting, I think.
Yeah, very interesting. I mean, I think you can see that also in journalism, let's say, or media. You can say, because the amount of stories that take this sort of logic, but the stories, the media themselves obviously are in a position to tell the truth, but instead they choose to tell that there is deceit.
There is deceit, and that there's all these lies, and which also they are, but there is all very often, particularly I think among the media who are the most prominent fake news media, there is always this narrative about everything that is lied about and hidden by this and that and that, and which is not, which is an indirect way of trying to hint at something that they are claiming. As
Yes,
I said, they
yeah.
don't simply come and say, okay, this is what is happening, because obviously they usually don't have proofs or whatever. So it's easier or more interesting to go by the way of double negation, so to say, you know, to say, oh, they are hiding this fact. It must be something, you know, that there is this kind of a narrative built around what is not being revealed and why it is not being revealed and how it is that this then connects to some other things. But it is,
Yeah. It's an extremely interesting idea, and it helps to understand lots of different things. I mean, I don't know if you probably didn't see so much of it over here, but this whole, parties that Boris Johnson was having in the UK and so on is a great example of how this.
But
structure
this also brings us back to the beginning of our discussion, when I was perhaps expressing myself a little bit confusedly, but this is precisely what I meant by the unconscious of the elite, you know, because the message of these parties during the COVID, on the one hand, there is not even a message. It is obvious problem that there are two different set of rules for two different set of people. So the ones in power can party, the ones who are not in power cannot. But then there is another message, which is that if they party, they don't really believe that COVID is so lethal or deadly. So, you know what I said before, that there is this message that says, okay, they don't really believe, so it's probably true that it isn't, because they are in the position to know. They are in the position to, the best position to. So if they still party, then they really don't believe in the reality of the threat. But I think this is precisely the problem, because they are so stupid as to not know. I mean, and I'm sure that some of them got sick, and I don't know. I mean, it's not even the question of what the follow-up, but this kind of a attitude, and this, I think, another way perhaps of putting what I'm trying to say is to think of the Truman Show. You know, this is the movie which conspiracy theorists really like. I mean, this is their favorite movie, because they see it as a kind of precisely embodiment of how world functions, so that everything is putting up this show in order to deceive this one person, who then, you know, tries to make it to the other side, so to say, to break his way into the big outside the reality and so on. But I think this is not at all what is happening today. I think the Truman Show is today not. It's the space of financial capital, of stock market, of precisely business as usual that is going on, through which the so-called elites are putting up this show, not for some stupid little people, but for themselves, so that they can believe that there is no such thing as threat. So the Truman Show, it's their show, they're putting it up for them, so that they can be completely disconnected from reality. And this is why I think one should precisely not believe, not take their crazy, stupid unconscious as the proof that there is really no danger. As you know. So just this was what.
No, that's a great point. I mean, that's totally. I think that's something really important, and I think you perhaps coming to the point of proving there that conspiracy theorists or conspiracist thinking is. There's a parallel with that and mainstream thinking, which is now visible from what you said, because this is whereas the the so-called elites or media elites, politicians, whatever, would want you to think of them as being the opposite to the conspiracists, and indeed the conspiracists want to think of themselves as the opposite of the elites. Precisely. But actually what you're arguing is that this is the same
this structure. Is the two sides of one coin, and there is a real dynamics between the two, and a real complicity in the sense, or economy in the sense that precisely it's so easy for the elites to point to these extreme views and these ridiculous stories. Some of them are really, they're plain ridiculous, but not seeing how they're themselves behaving ridiculously without this kind of narrative behind it. This is what I call conspiracy theory without conspiracy, because I think there is a conspiracy.
Yeah, no, I agree. And my favourite conspiracy theory is this thing called birds aren't real. I don't know if you've ever heard of this. It's so silly. It's sort of a joke and but the idea is that in the 80s, Reagan and his administration replaced all the pigeons with drones. So when you see a pigeon now, it's actually a drone. But I like this because it seems to be kind of making exactly this point. Like, although this is so silly, it's kind of how we think. Right.
Yeah, no, this is what I liked about Don't Look Up, because everybody said it's too silly, it's too caricatural, too extreme. No, but the reality is too silly. I mean, there is no way any movie, any ridiculous comedy could catch up with the silliness of the reality that we are living in. And I think this is, for me, this is why it was a very kind of proof that I was perhaps thinking right in this sense when, although kind of really torn apart by many cultural critics on the left as well, climate scientists said that this was the best movie ever made about climate change, because this is the frustration that we are experiencing. It's not simply about some extremist denial. This is precisely, it's all out there. We all know it. It's up there, down there, whatever. But it's still impossible to scream. It's just you are as ridiculous as the characters in the movie. You feel completely. So it's not. Even if it is caricature, it is precisely because the reality is becoming a kind of caricature of itself, and it's hard to be more to exaggerate in this respect, because the collage, this kind of leg, it's really astonishing, and it's
Yeah, another sort of separate thing as I was thinking about when I was thinking about conspiracy theory today was like the question of whether it's a kind of paranoia, because in a sense, obviously, it seems like it is, because it's sort of looking for the cracks. It's seeing the cracks in reality everywhere, I guess. But I think you're more saying the opposite. Whereas this is the condition we actively want to put ourselves in, right? This kind of conspiracist thinking. It's like something we. Like at the level of the subject, we sort of want to be believe in this deceiving other.
First of all, they look for the cracks, but these cracks are the cracks in the so-called illusion that is being put up for us, which here and there perhaps makes you perceive that there is another reality behind it, which is in the sense, but that there is, how you interpret these cracks, it's precisely how you kind of make it the whole story in a way. So there is this, paranoia is certainly there. This one cannot treat all kinds of conspiracy theorists and their advocates as one monolith thing. There are clearly, if you look, it's an interesting documentary on Netflix on the flat earthers. I forgot Behind the Curve, I think it's called. And there you clearly have some testimonies of people who are clearly paranoid, in the sense that you can see, all this. They are deceiving because there is this discourse of the really, really big other, who whatever, and their story is kind of put together with bits and pieces, everything combines, even though it makes sense only for them, I guess, in the narrative, that this is from vaccines to geocentric system to school system in America. This is just one big arc when everything makes sense the way the so-called whatever mainstream media presented to us. So there is this almost dream logic to some of this, when you can see with Freud precisely how you compose a reality with these bits, but in a way that it makes perfect sense for you when you dream. When you wake up, it's no longer so. But there is not. This was Freud's point. There was. In the dream work, there is a logic in the dream work. It's not simply that it is irrational and then you only discover this when you are awake. No, it's that it is not irrational. It is very rational. Only the key to this rationality is slightly different from. It's different from what we call, normal rationality. But it's not simply chaotic. Whenever it does make certain sense, to whom it's another question, but and it's all about making sense. This is this kind of delirium of interpretation. This is also something which is extremely present in I would say in all the conspiracy theories.
Yeah, and it would be also, I mean, I suppose that's the point you made about the Truman Show, that, you know, looking for the cracks there is only because you're really, what you're really looking for is the outside reality, which is the real truth and so on. You're not actually looking to break up any sense of reality. You're looking to secure your sense that there is an outside reality.
But it's also, and this is also interesting because I find there is something interesting between the way conspiracy theories work and interpret or compose the story and what was known from history of astronomy as saving the phenomena. You know that there was a point when Ptolemaic system, which was heliocentric system, before it was officially replaced by the heliocentric system, the technical devices of observing the universe and so on were already developed to such extent that the Ptolemean system, which claimed the center is standing still at the center, that Earth is standing still at the center of the universe and all the planets just moving around it, no longer made sense because planet made this kind of, it wasn't compatible with the empirical observation. So saving phenomena was a huge astronomical enterprise who introduced a ton of extremely complicated sub-theories of epicycles and epicenters that explained that even though we see the planet moving like this, it is still circular moment. I mean, this kind of extremely complicated theories, and usually very often these conspiracy theories are just fantastic, also in the sense of how rich they are in some kind of invention of all possibilities. And I see this precisely as a way in which, you know, you don't, it's not about interpreting what you see in this or that way or more rightly or not. You interpret things with a view, with a full view on the result that you already know, which is your conspiracy theory. So you say the Earth is flat, and you look for
then
clues
you find that
there.
to be true. Right.
Not only that you confirm your theory, but you also, the whole hermeneutic machine works so that you look at certain facts and you think very hard about how to make them fit your theory instead of confirming the official scientific say. So you say, okay, yeah, true, we see this, you know, this is also in the movie how these people, the flat earthers, they're actually extremely into scientific measurements and explaining how this illusion of the Earth being, you know, they are not just sitting at home and fantasizing about Earth being flat. They're actually out in the field, as we say, making all these measurements and coming up with theory that would make them prove that it is precisely that what we perceive as reality. They don't say there is no, you don't see the whatever, you see this, the sun goes down into the sea, which is, but they all find just another way of explaining this. They don't simply deny what we all see, but they present these extremely complicated theories that are supposed to produce the same result, only with their whatever geocentric system or whatever. So it's interesting.
Yeah, but do you think that sort of extends? Are you trying to sort of use that to suggest that this is a characteristic of contemporary thinking? I mean, when people who are not conspiracy theorists, for example, because it occurs to me to say there's a huge tendency to do this, and say Marxist groups, for example, or whatever it might be. You know, they're not everyone's perhaps equally guilty, but what you described there does seem to be like a characteristic of how we tend to read things and present things today.
Yes, there is this not exactly the specific branch of hermeneutics, which is precisely about. It's almost a language game or a fact game, how to manipulate, not in the sense of how to handle or put together certain facts so that they would prove whatever, the theory that you already have. So this certainly is done a lot, and I think it's made even more easier by the way in which, okay, it's common knowledge, this kind of social media also function as bubbles when you can, when people are discussing with people who are mostly of the same set of mind. So it's not really that you even get to really argue. You have one big enemy, and then you are within a group and kind of with members kind of reinforcing themselves in this argument. So it's true that there is the old pioneer. I'm not sure if this is not a fantasy, but this idea that we have of science as being based really on discovering things and going into the unknown and then trying to make the it's that now it's more and more about just proving what we but I still think obviously that there is a difference between science with all the flaws that we can attribute to the way in which science functions socially today within capitalism and so on, but still that there is something which is radically different in this so-called scientific method.
I think, I agree, and I think you are on something quite important with that connection to social media, because this idea that kind of what people call filter bubbles, but these ways in which we function in sort of separated off groups, allows this kind of conspiracist thinking or proving your own points thinking to emerge, and obviously social media, lots of the QAnon thing was very much based on 4chan and so on. So I was going to ask you, like, one of my last questions is going to be, why do you think this has happened in today's political climate? This kind of, obviously some of the examples we gave are quite historical, but also at the same time there's this kind of boom in conspiracist thinking today. So I was interested in why do you think that's happened? Like, what does this say about politics today that this situation with the mainstream and conspiracy is happening? And perhaps just a small part of that answer is actually that point about social media influencing these communities and so on.
No, I think the simplest answer to your question, what is wrong with the politics today, would be that there is no politics. There is managing of whatever, governmenting and so on, but there is no or very little politics precisely in the sense of thinking, again, of the social of the world as a kind of totality, and thinking about it in a different way that so-called globalism, or not even so-called, the globalism precisely isn't thinking about it. It's just kind of making it connect in certain ways and completely disconnect in others. So I guess the fact, another way of putting this would be to point to, again, the obvious fact that the social ties are really dissolving, that there is this kind of fragmentation of the social. Even on the most basic level of employment, which is nevertheless one of the central, let's say, dimensions of human life usually, that you have a job, but not just the fact that more than half people are self-employed, and there is this kind of, there are many social ties. I'm not saying that all of them, but there are many social ties that are simply disappearing, and that everybody is more and more becoming their own self-standing unit of whatever, and this certainly is a good field, a good ground for this kind of returning with vengeance of this kind of collective thinking, which it seems only exists on the level precisely of the unconscious. That there is this kind of singularization of the way the social functions, and I'm not only talking about social security. Social networks that kind of help you through whatever difficult times. But also in the most basic production relationships and so on. So it's not even so much about how they will someone will exploit you at work. It is how they will help you exploit yourself at work. So and there is a lot that is going on in this fragmentary way, and I see that there is a clear correlation between this modality of thinking, which tries to make some sense, or even if it's completely delirious sense of what is going on, but also precisely, and I think this is the problem, it's not, one also should not simply romanticize this, to say, okay, but it's here it's the symptom, so they are right. They're right and they're wrong, because they're right in a way that also obfuscates real problems. And I think this is some of the things that I was saying at the beginning. There is a problem, and these phenomena that include conspiracy theories are part of the problem, a symptom of this problem, but this does not mean that simply that they are kind of directly right. But as I also said, there is some peu du réel which kind of drives this machine. And the point is precisely to look there, to try to formulate this kind of antagonisms that drive this, instead of simply either endorsing this as a kind, they are the last point of resistance in this mad world, or to simply dismiss them as the crazy people who just have lost it.
So I mean, I was also thinking of asking, we've kind of answered it there, but I was also thinking of asking how you think we should approach, when we encounter this conspiracist thinking in our lives today. But I think you've kind of answered it, because it's that, you want to, you're not saying it's right. They're a symptom of various sort of economic and capitalist of things that are happening. They're a symptom of that, so they have to be taken seriously as that. But also they can serve to obfuscate or hide what they're a symptom of in a way. So we need to keep it in clear view that these are symptoms of a wider thing rather than
absolutely. No, absolutely. But I think the only way to counter this is not. I don't think we can kind of individually one convince these people of that it's not really like this, or they cannot convince us probably that it's the way. So it is really the only way out of this is by through emancipatory politics, which would change it's not directly addressing the pathologies, the whatever phantasmatic scenario. They will, I really believe that they will or would kind of, not completely, but disappear and become not at all important socially, if the social structure were to change in an important, serious way. So that there would simply not be no place, or it's not even the question of place, no reason for this to have such a important place or role in the social, in how it functions. So I guess it's so we should look at the bigger picture also, and not just focus directly on conspiracies, although they are interesting phenomena and very picturesque, sometimes funny. But it's not to ridicule them, but not also to just it's something needs to change here. And only some kind of a serious emancipatory global politics can change this. But this is, absolutely a very abstract answer. But I'm just saying that it won't change by people. I mean, this is also why we are now confined to these bubbles, that even when people try to talk or argue, it usually doesn't work at all. It's just, it very soon escalates in some kind of insults, or just complete impossibility of to kind of hear what the other is saying, or kind of find some kind of common ground where perhaps there are things to be negotiated and arguments to be made. So it's
absolutely, no, they do. I mean, just very quickly, last thing, I mean, we've talked about quite a few, but we talked a bit about mentioned the flat earth, climate change, I don't know what else we covered there, but I just wondered. I mean, like you just said, I mean, this is not really a serious question, but they can be really funny and fascinating. Like, what were some of the conspiracy theories that you personally found like really kind of intriguing when you were sort of doing the thinking behind this research and so on?
I mean, this was just research for one article,
Okay.
so it's not that I wasn't. No. I just I read a few books. I watched some documentaries, listened to some of the things, but I don't have. I think beyond the ones that we have already mentioned, I don't have some kind of
you weren't tempted to become a flat earther or something like that.
No, but it's really also interesting to see how they are nevertheless different in texture. There are some which much more focus on this idea of enjoyment of the other, of the someone stealing our enjoyment, and they are in this sense a kind of a response to what we just discussed as this kind of a social ticking bomb. But there are also some of them who are much more abstract, precisely flat earthers and this moon landing, where they you can see they simply have fun. Just it's even the kids like to watch this. I know that my kid watches this. How they try to prove that there was flag was moving. All these things, and they are kind of fascinated by this. They find it funny, but at the same time kind of slightly intriguing. But what would be the explanation? But this is interesting because I think this is precisely the mechanism by which people do get pulled into this, because one thing that I learned when I was reading these testimonies, whatever, is that most of them said that they were they found the whole thing completely ridiculous at the beginning. That there was for them it was really funny, ridiculous. They were completely incredulous about this, but there was something there, and they just kept looking more and more and having fun, looking first ridiculizing this and then, but perhaps there is something in it, and then you are very quickly you'll go down the rabbit hole, as they say. And it's very interesting how this incredulity is precisely part of the argument for them. But they were not like believers from the outset. They were really skeptical about it. They didn't believe. They thought, but the more they looked into it, the more this kind of hermeneutic enjoyment of what, if we look at this from another side, was really becoming more and more captivating for them. So that the more they were skeptical at the beginning, the more they ended up fanatically defending. So it's also an interesting play of skepticism and credulity, which are not as much as two opposites as we sometimes tend to believe. So but there is a certain kind of social enjoyment which is not necessarily devastating, but that people kind of have fun. But this is kind of general theory. This kind of ironic distance is precisely first step to really starting to believe, because this is precisely what allows you to a little bit enjoy, but then all of a sudden you really end on the other side of this. And
no, absolutely. I mean, for the record, I don't think people landed on the moon, and I definitely first of all thought, this is funny, I'm just enjoying this nonsense, but now I am convinced they didn't. Anyway, thanks so much for talking about it. I think it really is important. What is important about what you're saying, I think, really shows that thinking and talking about conspiracy is a huge issue for contemporary politics and society, and thinking about it in this way as this kind of symptom, I think, is critical. So I think it's brilliant to have these discussions. And thanks for doing it.
Thank you for for coming here and doing this.
I know lots of our listeners were excited when I said you might do one, so they'll be happy. Okay.